welcome to Tuesday's edition of the Nation Update. I'm Jessy Chahal. On the program today, lots in store with us covering what has been headlining across the nation and beyond as well. Here's a quick recap at today's Parliament sitting in case you've missed it. Firstly, the virtual COVID-19 assessment centres will be expanded to several states, and the National Rapid Response Team has been formed to address manpower shortages for COVID-19 treatment. On the program today, I'm joined by two guests. Firstly, Dato Dr. A.T. Kumararajah, Secretary General at the Malaysian Association Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry on the 12th Malaysia Plan, which will be tabled come Monday, as well as to Professor Dato Noor Aziah Muhammad Awal, Children Commissioner at Suhakam on sexual harassment. Here's a quick look at what's been happening at the Dewan Rakyat. Earlier today, the Health Minister, Khairi Jamaluddin, says there are plans to expand virtual COVID-19 assessment centres or CAC in several states. And this move will allow for assessment to be carried out virtually, initially with cases referred for further medical treatment if needed. Also on the Health Minister's book, perhaps, was what he told Parliament's lower house today, and that is that the National Rapid Response Task Force that he helped set up is meant to address manpower shortages for COVID-19 treatment. Now, he was responding to a question by the MP Teo Ni Ching of Kulai, who raised concerns about a growing number of health frontline workers suffering from burnt out as the pandemic has dragged on for almost 2 years. That's looking back, it just seems like a really long time. We're just under that 2-year mark as well. Now, Khairi Jamaluddin says Penang was among states where the task force has been deployed as its public hospitals have been swamped by the climbing figures of COVID-19 patients, causing delays to treatment for other chronic illnesses as well. We move on to what the Home Minister had to say. They say they have made a special request of 10 million ringgit so that more initiatives can be carried out to maintain the recovery of former drug addicts. Now, this is a request that has been made under the Budget 2022, and efforts to ensure former drug addicts do not go back to their old habits were as equally important as treating substance abusers. Of course, sound observation there, and we hope that this budget will also be approved. Moving on to the National Recovery Council, its chairman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has asked the ministers concerned to review the relevant standard operating procedures, of course SOPs, to ensure smooth reopening of economic sectors as the country moves towards the endemic phase of COVID-19. Now, the previous Prime Minister had this to say. He said this was because Malaysia needs to streamline SOPs, just like how it now allows travel to Langkawi without a police permit if it is undertaken by air, but a police permit is still compulsory if the travel is by land. Now, aside from all of this, and in reference to the 12th Malaysia Plan, the ex-Prime Minister also said that he should take into consideration the forms of support from the aspects of the government as well as the private sector so that the economic and social sectors can continue to be open. Of course, a lot of points to consider there, a lot of factors as well. Nothing can be sort of a blanket SOP for now, in phases and in stages. Now, to give us a better perspective of that as well, and speaking of the 12th Malaysia Plan, I'd like to bring in Dr. A.T. Kumararajah, Secretary General, the Malaysian Associated Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Hi, Doctor. It's good to see you again. As we talk about the 12th Malaysia Plan, which will be tabled in just under a week, in less than a week, we also know that this is a 5-year development plan towards realizing the vision of 2020 in aspect as well. So let's begin with this, Doctor. The preparation for the 11th Malaysia Plan was initially based on the National Development Strategy of Malaysia, or MAICCI. It was focused on the development of people-based economy and capital-based economy with the implementation of high-impact projects. Now, the 11th Malaysia Plan was tabled at the House of Representatives back then by the Prime Minister, Dato Sri Najib Tun Razak. This was year 2015. Have you seen a smooth implementation of at least a few of these areas in the last plan?
So, Jessy, I think while it's probably fair to make these comparisons to the 11th Malaysia Plan, the way the preparations and the kickoff and also the implementation, I think the 12th Malaysia Plan is very new in terms of implementation because, one, we are actually late. while we speak about it, actually 12th Malaysia Plan should have been tabled last year, and we should be in the first year of implementation. But now we have technically lost out 20% of our time, because by the time the plan comes on board, we have actually lost out 2021. So that one case being one important factor. So comparisons to the 11th Malaysia Plan, 12th Malaysia Plan may not be fair. While the 11th Malaysia Plan would have been the penultimate lap as far as the 2020 vision, but again, we have moved the 2020 vision towards the 2030 vision, so which means the opening gambit for the 2030 vision happens to be the 12th Malaysia Plan. And I think that's one fundamental difference. And I think the way government was structured, the way the civil service and also the private sector participation on the 11th Malaysia Plan may have been a lot more inclusive. 12th Malaysia Plan, we started work very early, 4 years ago. We've already got in touch with various organizations, social service organizations, and even the business-based chambers of commerce, and everybody got into the game much earlier. I think what we can learn is from some of the takings of the 11th Malaysia Plan were actually realized in the very end of that 11th Malaysia Plan. If you take the successes of MDEC in the digital economy, a lot of that was reached towards the very last end. So about 40% of the success came in the 20% of the time. And that is how...
What you're saying is the 12th Malaysia Plan literally will hit the ground running. I'd like to take you to the portal, www.malaysia.gov.my. In that, it's also been shared that the 12th Malaysia Plan will be aligned with shared prosperity. We saw some charts come out as well, sustainability and social re-engineering. I think such huge factors to consider, as well as we are, post-pandemic and in an endemic stage. So, Doctor, how would you approximate what should be the more important touch points as this plan is rolled out?
So, Jessy, that's again, right? So you mentioned those three development agendas, right? So those development dimensions, as they called it, economic empowerment, sustainability, and also social re-engineering, while assumptions went in for that in the pre-pandemic phase. So I think government should have done this in the last 6 months or a year, in terms of revisited a lot of these goals, revisited some of the assumptions, reviewed where necessary, and certainly recast where we must, because a lot of assumptions would have taken. If you take the social demographics, the T20, 15% of them moved down to M40, and the M40, 20% have actually moved on to the B40. So the B40 social safety nets have actually increased. The need for social safety net has increased, and the quantum may have even increased. So the assumptions that went in much earlier may have to be revisited, and the methodology, that's where the social re-engineering comes on board very much, because the disruption COVID has made in terms of delivery of services, even the digital government, digital delivery of systems, even from the government end, may have changed. So that is something that we must be very, very careful on. And even if you look at the dynamics of businesses themselves, if you realize that a lot of the businesses have actually changed, whether the business model has changed, circular economy, shared economy has actually become very important. And the way we pivot from the earlier conservative, conventional ways of doing businesses, looking at the micro business landscape has actually changed very much. Grand Prihatin has actually done about 1 million businesses. Earlier assumptions we were at 700,000. How much of that 700,000 or these million businesses today exists is one major question. Second, even for the small and medium-sized enterprises, after having sustained 18 months of complete disruption into the cash flow and also the business sustainability, how many of them, in which sectors, in which are the fast-moving, like you said, when we hit the ground running, how many of these businesses will be able to pivot on to the new business landscape? So that's one thing the 12th Malaysia Plan realities must take into account. And I think the very other important thing is in terms of this sustainability and environment, this triple bottom line that we speak of, it is not new. It is something that we have always professed on. And this triple bottom line, as we call it, whether the ESG programs that many corporates have actually embraced, the environmental, social and governance story, or even bringing back the SDG, the UN's 17 SDG goals into play.
Right.
I think a lot of businesses today, even the SMEs, probably will want to pivot onto that, because as we try to differentiate from a global landscape or even from an ASEAN perspective, I think Malaysian companies will do very, very well if we can differentiate ourselves based on these triple bottom line stories, the SDG goals. And I think we've got a good narrative in that end.
That's right, Doctor. Of course, many points and vital and imperative salient points you have to share, especially with the 12th Malaysia Plan. It does seem that there needs to be some re-engineering in itself. It needs to be reworked. And I hope all this perhaps can be achieved by Monday so that, a solid plan is rolled out. Very quickly, without much time left on the clock, we look at what's happening globally and all the different shifts. And the next big thing in world economy is to get on the bandwagon of climate change initiatives. This time around, however, people may not have the luxury of appearing on a BBC channel and talking about rights to clear forests and so on and so forth. How do we skin this cat in terms of having it have its presence and weight in the 12th Malaysia Plan? Or do you think we should we should sort of wait till we get to this bridge and then wing it at that point?
I personally think, Jessy, I think it's sure. Sorry, I think we should actually do it, because if we don't, we will be very when the world catches up with the whole thing, we'll probably be at the tail end of it. So we should do it, and I think it should come from a top to down perspective. And I think a lot of the government-linked companies, especially the big boys, should actually be able to have some sort of a system where we're able to nurture not only the big companies towards the small and medium-sized enterprises, but what we can come up with very structured methodology and what are the milestones that we want to achieve within taking the broader changes in the world and bringing it to an ASEAN or even a Malaysian perspective, and looking at some of the things like whether we talk about the renewable energy stories, whether we talk about in terms of how we are sustaining even in palm oil. We actually can bring back the narrative ourselves instead of being forced to talk about RSPO.
So skew it down and have it perhaps a little bit more narrow to our advantage and look from a Malaysian perspective.
Yes, bring back a Malaysian narrative into it. And I think the SPV 2030, the 15 key economic growth areas that has been earlier identified, should work very well with the 12th Malaysia Plan. I think the government should be able to, while this political stability has been achieved or the ceasefire, will allow us that maneuvering space. And I think the government should do very well next week, while keeping the plan agile and dynamic.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You managed to squeeze in all that, sort of input and knowledge in just that short time. It's been a pleasure. That was Dr. A.T. Kumararajah, Secretary General of the Malaysian Associated Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, weighing in a little bit on the impending 12th Malaysia Plan, which will be tabled in just under a week on Monday. From that, let's move on to something else that has really sort of been bugging Malaysian women, if not the population at large. As we know, women hold up half the sky, but more than 50% of Malaysian women between the ages of 18 and 50, or rather 30, have directly experienced some form of sexual harassment in the country. These are facts and figures picked up by a survey that was carried out by the Centre for Governance and Political Studies, conducted in collaboration with Awal, and that is the All Women's Action Society. In this survey, it was found that 44% of women experienced a teacher, in fact, making sexually provocative jokes. There were a few other findings. 68% of women said that they did not feel safe when they were driving and out at night. 30% of the respondents also said they regularly receive unwanted sexual messages on social media. And as you know, mostly everyone has some form of social media. And finally, 18% of the respondents said that they were victims of sexual provocation from a family member, while 10% have been harassed in elevators. So question of safety is one that we need to keep talking about as well, to bring up to the surface and ensure that people who can make a change are held accountable for that as well. Moving on, I'd like to bring in Professor Dato Noor Aziah Muhammad Awal. She's a Children Commissioner at Suhakam, and she will be telling us a little bit more in terms of her perspective as well about this social issue that we have at this point, sexual harassment. Dato, thank you so much for weighing in today and joining me in this discussion. Now, based on the latest survey by the Centre for Governance, the CENT GPS rather, 50% of women ages between 18 and 30, they say they have directly, and this is rather strong, directly experienced some form of sexual harassment. So being at the of this for most of your career. How do you reconcile with stats and figures and statements like this?
Well, very good afternoon. Thank you, Jessy. I think sexual harassment is a very serious thing to me, and it had many research survey has been done, and I think this latest one was quite alarming because I think there are cases where women do feel frightened as such to go and see a doctor, even to go to classes or even to be out in the open, in public places because of sexual harassment. So, and I think it is timely that the government should pass the Sexual Harassment Act that it was a bill, it was drafted, and I think something had to be done because sexual harassment is if it's being done to a person, it has a long effect. It affects your life, your family life, and therefore sometimes, to me, if it's happening at a place of work, it could cause your ability to work in an efficient way, and there is always that worry. So to me, that survey is important to look at seriously, and our bill on sexual harassment should be passed and be taken to Parliament as soon as we can.
Right. Well, Prof, it is an issue when we talk about sexual harassment. Sort of by default, almost we look at females as well, especially based on the survey for a point of discussion. But I also just want to establish that it is a form of discrimination. It is a complex social issue, and it has psychological implications for anyone who's harassed. Yes. Right. So let's sort of scale out a little bit from a more sort of a Southeast Asian angle. Do you think this issue extends? Is it an Asian thing, or is it by culture? Is it by some sort of form of acceptance? What's your opinion?
I think it is a culture. A kind of Southeast Asian kind of culture, because if you look at some of the research being done, I've been reading some of the academic research and writings, and there are reports, as early as 2000, in the year 2000, 2010, about because most countries are developing, women are going to start to go to work and mixing in public, and because not many people, in particular I think in the South Asian countries, felt that sexual harassment is something to worry about. It is being taken for granted. People make sexual jokes, and in particular where there's quite a big number of men and a smaller number of women in that particular department or so. But even in the public, general public, in terms of the balance between men and women are the same. This kind of bad jokes, sexual tinted jokes are being done, and these actually affect the woman in general. Be it school children. I was very shocked when there was a case where a student actually complained that the teacher was making a joke on rape.
Right, Prof. I'm just going to jump in here, Prof, to say that in the past decade or so, perhaps more recent, in the past 5 years, we've seen an increase in awareness campaigns. Even in primary and secondary school, we see that there has been more conversation about this. But my question is, how much has this helped the situation? Has there been enough exposure given to girls and young adult females and males alike on women's rights? Or is it something we still sort of shy away or approach with much hesitancy?
I think the awareness campaign has worked. A lot more women or girls, young girls, come forward and talk about being sexually harassed. And it used to be, it was something embarrassing. Used to be they felt that it was their fault that they are being sexually harassed. But today, because of the campaign, because of the awareness campaign that we do, I think it works very well. Of course, as you know, Suhakam, we already have the ATAM program, whereby we have a human right module that is being taught at schools for Form 3 students and also Form 5 students. And this, I think, has helped a lot, creating students to know that what is sexual harassment, what is not sexual harassment. And also a lot of, I mean, I've been doing a lot of giving lectures on sexual harassments to a woman in general. I mean, it can be anywhere. So long as they invite me, I will come and I will explain to them, this cannot go on. You must actually talk about it. And of course, today, a lot of government departments, government agencies, and also private one have their policy on sexual harassment. Because for government, we no doubt we don't have a law at the moment, but we have at least a code of ethics. And someone who actually sexually harassed a colleague or in whatever form in work can be taken to a disciplinary panel where that action could be taken against them. But
well, Prof, of course, the good news, Prof, is that several MPs have already urged the government to look at and immediately address the anti-sexual harassment bill that needs to be tabled in Parliament to protect women's interests and safety, and it has to start at some point, and that's
you
a
must,
start.
yes.
So in your opinion, quite quickly, what has been some of perhaps the upsides in dealing with sexual harassment in Malaysia?
Well, basically, I think there must be the setting, because as I said again, because of the cultural sort of background and the dominance. I mean, this is the same as domestic violence, issues of sexual harassment, things that crops out maybe in the past 15 years, and getting men in general, because usually sexual harassments come men sexually harassing women, and needs to be given the idea, and they must be aware that what they are doing is actually wrong and is affecting a lot of people. So we must, even MPs, when I remember going to Parliament when the minister was trying to explain the sexual harassment, even then there was voices at the back talk. To me that is very embarrassing for MPs even to make
that's something that has to stop and really must be addressed as well.
Yes.
They must be held accountable. Professor, thank you very much for weighing in and being with us, bringing to light as well the importance of sexual harassment education and awareness here in the country. That was Professor Dato Noor Aziah Muhammad Awal, Children Commissioner at Suhakam, weighing in a little bit on a very pressing and complex social issue. Very quickly, the Deputy Health Minister has said that teenagers aged 12 to 17 can now get their COVID-19 jabs via a scheduled walk-in process at 156 different selected PPV nationwide. Schools will also be issuing schedules on when students can get vaccinated at their selected PPVs. Teenagers can actually go to PPVs which are located nearby to their schools. So a lot of improvement there in terms of accessibility and having, a chance to be inoculated as well. Moving on very quickly to tell you, bring you up to speed what's been happening internationally. Here's a snapshot of international news. The ASEAN Development Bank has called for economies to adapt to a new normal after COVID-19. So that's a new normal to underpin recovery as developing Asia's rebound this year could be dented by the rapid spread of the Delta coronavirus variant. Now, this growth projections, they say, are risky given the threats posed by the emergence of new variants, some of which we don't even know quite yet, a slower than expected vaccine rollouts, and the waning vaccine effectiveness as well. And a Colombian president has told the United Nations General Assembly that the international community must distribute COVID-19 vaccines equally to avoid the creation of new, more fearsome variants of the coronavirus. Any production delay, he says, at the vaccine manufacturers can and has left some Colombians waiting for doses in just recent weeks, as we've seen. Now, the president says he'll call on the international community to strengthen, their hands and joint efforts in regards to health and advance in vaccine distribution equity. And the authority on, of course, all things relating to COVID-19. At this point, the World Health Organization has said Delta has all but elbowed out 3 other COVID-19 variants of concern, which now represent a tiny fraction of the samples being sequenced. The WHO's technical lead on COVID-19 says Delta has become more fit, more transmissible, and is out-competing, even replacing the other viruses that are circulating, adding that Delta has been detected in more than 185 countries till date. And in South Korea, its president has addressed the United Nations General Assembly and repeated a call for declaration to formally end the 1953 Korean War. Of course, the president also urged the community of nations to mobilize its strength for the end of war declaration on the Korean Peninsula. And thousands of Argentines took to streets of the capital to demand income support after 12-month inflation had soared past 50% this year. Different civil society groups marched towards the Social Development Ministry to demand a boost in minimum wage, with some trade union groups arguing that a 46% increase would tackle a loss in purchasing power. So, of course, things are quite topsy-turvy in many parts of the world as well. I'd like to bring your attention to what's trending on Twitter. Of course, we like to track and have a a social listen to what people are talking about and what's been busy on local Twitter. People on Twitter have been talking about the increasing number of COVID cases in Sarawak, which has made private hospitals to assist public hospitals in accepting COVID-19 cases as well, joining hands. And, once again, a big shout out to our frontliners there. Also, locally, tweets regarding the arrest of local transgender Noor in Thailand has been spreading widely on Twitter as well. And upon the tourism, people on Twitter have been tweeting out their excitement of having a getaway soon. That's right. We all need some respite. We all need to be out and about, but let's not forget our SOPs. Let's stay safe. Remember that none of us are safe till all of us are safe. With that, I'm Jessy Chahal. I'll see you same time, same place next time. Bye-bye.